We are going to talk about Unit 5.2 and 5.17. So things about forests and how to be sustainable forest people. So remember what an ecological service is. So that's something that nature does for us, and it provides us a service with regard to ecology, and it's something it does for free for us. So the forest does a lot of stuff. You can see the big list here. It's always good to memorize this so you can choose the right things on a multiple choice test or write things from an FRQ. So a lot of stuff, we've got habitat, so it'll provide some habitat for the wildlife that live in the forest. Definitely acts as a carbon sink because of trees absorbing the carbon dioxide, doing their photosynthesis. A forest can influence the local climate, so it can cool in the shade. It can actually lower general temperatures. Because it's darker, we have a lesser albedo effect, so that can also affect little local climates. The forest cycles air and water through photosynthesis, P-synth, and it can also, with the roots and the way water gets percolated into the soils of the forest, it can cycle in water and purify it, get down to that aquifer. Forests can reduce soil erosion, again, roots in the ground, and wind breaks from the trees prevent wind erosion. And then under the forest, or sorry, not under the forest, I was thinking aquifer. Water's going to run off or shed. So forests provide a watershed because usually forests are associated with mountains, and mountains run the water off and shed the water that then goes into the aquifer. Forests are heavily evolved in the carbon cycle, the sulfur cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the water cycle, so they help cycle all the necessary nutrients for life. A lot of unique plants can exist in forests, both rainforest and just like forests we have here, the pine forests, and a lot of unique animals and plants do unique things that actually give us clues to diseases and illnesses, and they have medicinal value. And a lot of indigenous people knew that and use herbal remedies for things, and the forest provides that. A lot of people in poverty use the forest to survive. They're not making money off of it, it's just how they live. It's warming themselves, feeding themselves, providing shelters for themselves, and just sustaining and having life. So those are a lot of things. Okay, economic services. Remember, that has to do with the money. So forests also give us fuel wood, which we buy and sell and use, a good and a service. They provide lumber for building things and other purposes, making paper. Under the forest, there's minerals in that soil to mine with. In Canada, they actually have tar sands, which is a source for fossil fuels, and that's how they get oil underneath the forest there. They can provide pastures for grazing animals, so farmers can graze on public lands instead of private lands and save a little bit of money because they don't have to buy hay. Forests are great for recreation. You can pay fees to camp and hike and go there and visit, so that's an economic boon, and they provide jobs for people. So there's a lot of different things that forests can provide economically as well. All right, so types of forests. This kind of has two meanings. There could be a rainforest. There could be a coniferous forest. That's the pine tree one. There could be a deciduous forest. I don't know how to spell deciduous. Deciduous. That looks wrong. It's probably with a C. I don't know. Deciduous. You figure it out. Anyways, and then there's the old growth forest, which means it's never been touched or hasn't been cut down. Humans have not disturbed it for a really long time. And you can see over time we had a lot of old growth forests, and then with industry we now have much less old growth forests. So we've got the redwoods here in Crescent City. I urge you to go visit those. We've got the protected forest in Yosemite. We've got Yellowstone, we've got the Cascades, and we've got a little bit in Arizona and New Mexico, these mountain ranges here. And then we've got the Appalachian Trail back east, but not much else is left. Why? Industry and money. Okay, so the old growth forests are more biodiverse. They've been around longer. They've had more opportunity for diversity to happen. You get older trees, mixed trees. You don't have a lot of human activity affecting it. And you've got this multi-layered canopy. So you've got these pretty clear forest floors. You can see that the floor down here in the redwood forest is pretty bare. And what is there, there's just a bunch of fern growth, plants that can grow in the shade because this canopy creates a lot of shade, which is why we have those lower temperatures from the other slide. The topography there, you've got these pits and these mounds because as trees fall down, they'll decompose and then they'll make these mounds. I don't know if you can see them really well, but there's a high place and a low place and a high place, and there's these moundy, if you look sideways, it's kind of pit and mound. The decaying wood is there, and it's full of nutrition. As the nutrients from the dying trees are decomposed, we get this nice ground layer. And then the dead trees also can be habitats. Things can live where these big trees fall down. There's a lot of indicator species. I hope you remember what that means, found in these forests. So they're the first species to indicate that the ecosystem is being affected in some way. And then because there's not that much vegetation on the floor, it's pretty bare, because there's no light, because of the canopy, we get these kind of cool paths. You can walk through here and just, it's like a nicely swept path. It's kind of cool. You should go there. All right, and trees have a really high economic value. So I don't know if I told my cousin Jim's story, but cousin Jim lives in Crescent City, California, and he is 7'6" tall, and he is a lumberjack. And he used to cut these trees down for his job, and they have a lot of economic value. Cousin Jim has 4, we'll just say it's these 4 trees right here in his backyard, redwood trees. And for his retirement, whenever he needs a little money, he cuts down a tree in his yard and has it hauled out. And I believe the last amount he got was $286,000 for one redwood tree. And he's got 3 left, so there's his retirement. Interesting. So you can see there's kind of a, what do I want to say? A conflict between the people who want this for money and the people who want to keep this habitat intact. But you can see the money is pretty influencing. What do? Do you keep the trees in habitat, or do you get your money for retirement? Okay, there's a lot of different ways we take trees out of the forest. A group of trees is called a stand. So this is a stand of trees right here. Trees, we can just wipe them all out. That's clear cutting. Just take every single tree out. So that looks like this. Just leave the stumps like in the picture back here. This is clear cutting. Another word for that is strip cutting. Kind of the same idea, but they take it out in sections. So if I have a bunch of trees in a stand here, and I want to clear cut, maybe I just take this, or strip cut, I take this strip out, I take this strip out, I take this strip out, and those guys are remaining, but it's still a form of clear cutting, is you're just taking it out in sections. So another thing we can do is selective cut. And selective cut, you just choose certain trees, and it kind of ends up like this little situation over here. So you can see that some mature trees are still intact, and some light is let into the bottom of the forest, which allows the smaller trees to start growing. So some argue that that's a good thing. And another one is a shelter wood. And so you leave a few mature trees around, sunlight hits the ground so the young saplings can actually grow. But the large tree keeps the soil intact because its roots are established, and so it gives a little benefit for the up and coming trees to come and start growing here under the protection of the shelter tree. So you can kind of see what happens. And then you can see a long time what the regrowth situation looks like. So you've got this old guy with a bunch of younglings for the shelter wood. You've got kind of a mixed thing going on with the selection, and you've got just full on new ones coming from the clear cut. There's pros and cons for both. And obviously the environmentalists want one way and the loggers want another way. So one's for money and one's for environmental protection, and that's always the conflict. So there's always a compromise. Okay, I encourage you to watch this video about why clear cutting, it's kind of a commercial why clear cutting is good. It gives some good pointers, but here they are summed up. So it's good economically because you just get in, you get out. It does let sun come in to regrow the saplings that do need sun to grow, and the big trees are sheltering it. It kind of mimics nature. Like if a big fire came, it would clear cut, or if a wind came, it'd blow everything down. And it's more economical just to come in and get it and get out. So here's a clear cutting, what's left over, and here's strip cutting over here. They just took a strip of the forest out. On the downside, when you clear this out, you could see a lot of erosion is going to happen. Runoff is going to just fly down here. This is all going to get swept out and eroded. So there goes the topsoil. Because there's no shade, we're going to have increased water temperature. We're going to get more flooding, pollution, because all that sediment is going to go into the water system. It will be warmer. No tree shade here, so soil's going to warm up and dehydrate, and we're going to have poorer soil quality. The habitat is going to be fragmented, and you can see here, this is fragmented habitat. We've got trees here, we don't have trees here, and that's fragmentation. And I already said that one. The soil will heat up, which could kill the microorganisms in the soil and make the soil more like dead dirt, and the nutrient cycling might stop or slow down. All right, so strip cutting, here's a visual of it. So again, you leave parts intact and you take out entire strips. So it's similar to clear cutting. It does serve as a windbreak a little bit. So you get a lot of wood out of it. You get a lot of profit. If you choose to forest or use fast growing trees, you can get a lot of turnaround, which is good money for the grower. You don't need to like plan or have a lot of skills. You need to grow it and mow it down. And it's good if your trees need a lot of light. It does take away from biodiversity, because if you're only foresting certain growing trees, you don't have the variety, so the biodiversity goes down, which disrupts the ecosystem, which affects the food web and the habitat. You have these big open spaces, which nobody likes. Nobody wants that. No animals are going to go through here and be out in the open. Predator-prey relationship's not good. It's going to be more water pollution, water runoff, flooding, erosion on the slopes. So that could be a problem. And it pretty much eliminates the recreational value. Nobody wants to go visit a strip cut forest. Has no appeal. All right, so selective cutting. This is in Mammoth. If you're interested, you could go see this. They do it at Mammoth on a hike on the way to the Rainbow Falls. I think this is my picture. Anyways, so you just remove single trees, so you can see they take the trees they want and just remove certain ones and leave others to grow. So you get these little small openings where these little trees are getting sunlight and they can start growing back and seed. So it's not as impactful than the clear cut. It's way better for the environment. But you still got to use the roads, you got to bring people in, use the heavy equipment. It still fragments the habitat, and it affects diversity because they're only cutting down this kind of tree. So that tree is not there. So that affects the diversity and the whole habitat balance. All right, so shelter wood's kind of the compromise. It's in between the clear cut and the selective cut. You cut some trees down, you keep mature trees there to shelter the seedlings, and it lets them get a little sunlight to grow. So this is kind of the compromise. And a couple years ago, this was like the preferred way for everybody to go. The builders don't love it because it's hard to get in there and pick certain ones and choose which ones stay, which ones go. The environmentalists don't love it either, but it's better than the other strip cut method. All right, just a visual to kind of help you get an idea of what's going on. So you can see, I think this is a good graphic. So obviously this is what the loggers want. This is what the environmentalists want. And this is the compromise. All right, so when we deforest, we are degrading the natural capital. We're degrading nature and all of the services and goods it provides us. So this is kind of the list of what happens. We get more water pollution, we get more soil pollution. Why? Well, water pollution because all of this is now going to run off or down into the water system, and it wasn't before. It was going to be water taken up. This is going to be sediment that is going to create turbidity in the water system. Turbidity blocks sunlight. Sunlight is needed in the waterways for plankton to grow, and so we're going to have a whole nutrient disruption there. Soil gets polluted this way because the roots are gone. It's going to run off. We're going to lose our topsoil, and we're going to have equipment on there, so there might be leaking. And excuse me. And we could have disruption just from human activity into that soil. The aquifers aren't going to get replenished. So remember, the aquifer is the way underground water, way under here, and this is all going to run off now and not percolate or go absorbed into the groundwater system. So percolation will stop, and so we won't get our aquifers replenished. So the water cycle gets affected for that reason. With less percolation means the water cycle, we're not going to have long-term water storage. Then we're not going to have as much atmospheric moisture. We're not going to get evaporation because this is going to be dried out. It's not going to have trees doing transpiration. So initially, we might get some evaporation, but this water is going to go elsewhere, and the trees are going to transpire, and the not trees aren't going to transpire. So we're going to have a drier climate because of the lack of trees. We'll get more flooding because this will just run off, and runoff creates flooding. Species won't be able to live here, so we could see endangered or threatened or even extincted species because their habitat is gone. So habitat loss links this to extinction. Erosion will mean less soil fertility, and then we're going to have the releasing of CO2 and the ability to absorb CO2. So when the trees die, they're going to release CO2 into the air, and there won't be as many trees to absorb CO2 to do their photosynthesis. So this is 5.17. What do we do to fix it? We become sustainable. We're more mindful. So one thing that the U.S. Forest Service said to do is to replant 2 trees for every tree taken out. So a 2-for-1 replacement rate. I can't say that. Replacement rate. So you've got your new forest, you do the thinning, you harvest and plant, and then you've got your new forest kind of cycling in. Another thing we can do is buy certified sustainable lumber. So this little stamp is on our wood. It is way more expensive, and the typical person isn't going to want to do that. We could repurpose old wood and use it for new wood. So this came off of an old door, reused 4x6 post. So that was a fence post, and now it's a door over the door header for building in a new construction. So repurposing wood, reusing wood is always good. Don't have to cut down more trees for it. Okay, so moving to tropical forests. So that was kind of deciduous forests and coniferous forests, but tropical forests have a little different story. There are a lot of hardwoods or exotic woods in the tropical forest, and they're really pretty, and they were chopped down for a long time because they were beautiful and desirable. And then another reason tropical rainforests got clear-cutted was because for cash crops. So you take out the regular forest, you get money for the existing plants and trees, for the hardwoods, but then you don't replant them. So now these trees are gone. The climate's a lot drier. There's a higher risk of fire. The topsoil starts to get dehydrated. Over a long period of time, if this keeps going, the rainforest will turn into a savanna. So think of your biomes, what that means. And we're going to lose a lot of biodiversity from these tropical rainforests being exploited for money. Okay, there's a lot of forest pests that come. A really famous one in apes is the bark beetle. It's this guy. This is his larva. You can see he's churning his way. This is what it looks like, the larva moving its way through the bark. So it's really easy to tell. The bark's stripped away. Notice the loss of bark, and then this movement. Look at that. They can destroy a lot of tree, and then the tree gets weaker and it can't stand up, and then it starts to not be there. It'll fall down, it'll die. It's a dead standing tree, and then this will go to another tree, and it just spreads and spreads and spreads. There's a lot of different pests. The bark beetle is just one example. There's a pine borer beetle. Seems to be a lot of beetles, but there's other things too that can affect forests and spread, so you need to control that. So my dad used to work in the Forest Service, and there'd be all these trees, and then you could tell if one had kind of a brownish yellowish look to it. That was a sickly tree, and if they didn't hurry up and chop that one down, it would spread to the good healthy trees. So a lot of the job in the Forest Service was to stop the spread of these beetles and chop out the tree that was affected and burn it to kill all the larvae. All right, so this idea of integrated pest management. So we don't want to just spray this beetle with some kind of beeticide, a pesticide, and give him some kind of poison. So if we do that, that could hurt other animals in the habitat because it's a poison. It's not just going to kill that guy, it's going to kill all the helpful insects, all the birds that eat those insects. We're going to get, biomagnification. So we don't want to just poison the heck out of everything. It could actually kill the plant too. It's a poison again. So sometimes we use different methods, different combinations of things to battle a pest. So maybe there's a biological thing. Maybe there is a plant that repulses the beetle and he doesn't like it, so he goes away from it. Maybe there's a predator that will eat the beetle and not other things and keep things intact. So biologically, we can do some things. Physically, we can remove the trees. We could remove the beetles. We could go around and pick them off. That might cost a lot of money and time and effort. And then we could look at chemical treatment. That's the pesticides. But we don't want to just run to that immediately. That's kind of the last resort. So we want to try other things or a combination of things before we resort to kill with poison. All right, another thing we do to kind of sustain the forest is these prescribed burnings, which means we're doing it on purpose. We control forest growth, we burn off different sections, and we backfire it. So when a fire comes, a fire needs fuel, but if there is no fuel because we already burn the fuel in a controlled burn, then the fire goes out faster. So it takes away the fuel, and its goal or intended purpose is to prevent large wildfires. Okay, a little word, I don't remember if I told you guys this or not, but Yellowstone. So I want you to know the no burn policy and what it did and what the consequences were. So for a long time, we did not burn in Yellowstone, and we had a huge fire, and now we have a let it burn policy. Make sure you know the difference. All right, we'll see you on the next video lecture.